expression be a way to inform my thesis project, and I'd love to just learn a little bit more about yourself and your background as a curator.
Sure. I'm Suzette McAvoy, and I've been an art curator now for 37 years. I started college as an undergraduate thinking I was going to be a lawyer. So I was a pre-law major, but during my freshman year, we had to take introduction to a variety of humanities courses, and I took Introduction to Art History, which we called Caves to Picasso. It was a really quick, sweeping view of the history of art.
Right.
But I had a really terrific professor, Elena Ciletti, who was so passionate about her subject and the way she talked about it, and that really resonated with me.
Absolutely.
And I found that it came easily to me, actually, to look at the images, look at the slides, and write about them and share what I saw with others. So that sort of changed. I changed my major and really started to focus more on art history. And I found that art history brought all the strands of things I was interested in: political history, literature, the cultural changes of the day, scientific breakthroughs. All of those things got reflected in the art or transformed art in one way. So it was just like I found that through art history, I could engage with a lot of things that I was really interested in.
Absolutely. Yeah, it seems to be its own language. Basically, art can, across sweeping forms of elements, it can just kind of communicate through that, which is wonderful.
Absolutely. And that's the other thing that really caught me, was this idea that art can really speak across time.
Absolutely.
And across demographics, and the fact that these objects have somehow endured through all of the
time,
chaos
and
and then we get to, as curators, share their stories. It's about animating, bringing these objects. What I keep reminding people is that every piece of art was made by another human being.
Exactly.
They're not inanimate objects in the sense that they really are imbued with the spirit of another human, the decisions of another human.
Absolutely.
Part of the curator's job is to share those stories. So then during my senior year, for my senior thesis, I curated my first exhibition, which was the work of a local sculptor named Genevieve Carr Hamlin.
Okay.
And I had the opportunity to do everything that was really involved in putting together an exhibition, doing a studio visit with her, interviewing her, writing about her work, writing the press release, arranging the shipping, the pedestals, arranging the opening, all of the aspects, the practical aspects of putting an exhibition together. And I found that I really loved that. I loved working with the objects, with the real thing, with the art, rather than just looking at slides and doing academic work, So that sort of cemented my idea that I wanted to go into museum work. My first job right out of college, though, was actually at the Museum of American History.
Oh, interesting.
At the Smithsonian. And I was in what they call the Objects Processing Facility, the OPF, which is, yes, it's under the mall. It's underground.
Oh my goodness.
And it's where the objects get brought into the Smithsonian. So if they're trucked in or whatever. And my job was to photograph them, do the condition report on them, and then send them to the appropriate curatorial department.
Okay.
So I handled Nancy Reagan's ball gown.
Oh my goodness.
Muhammad Ali's robe.
Cool.
Peggy Fleming's ice skates.
Oh my goodness, just everything.
Yes, Ronald Reagan's jar of jelly beans. All this stuff came in, you know. And what that really taught me was this idea of context. That, this pair of white ice skates.
Right.
Out of context could just be anybody. You could go and buy them locally at the local sporting goods store.
Right.
Or this jar of jelly beans taken out of context would have no meaning whatsoever.
Right.
But in the context of the Reagan administration, where he was known for having these on his desk, in the Oval Office, or the fact that Peggy Fleming won the gold medal at the Olympics, these objects putting into that contextual display really then communicated a different story.
No, for
and
sure, yeah.
so that I carry that through even into my curating of exhibitions of fine art, of art. That's the part that really gets me, my juices going as a curator, is telling those stories.
Yeah, and it's so fascinating because the way you're describing it to me reflects that human attachment to every single thing. Like you were just saying, like it could be just a jar of jelly beans. Like my grandpa growing up always had some kind of candy he was eating or whatever, but knowing it's attached to Ronald Reagan adds that just extra layer to it. And
Absolutely.
So, yeah, it's a really interesting thing, and it's funny you bring that up because part of I interned at the Zillman last year, and part of my job was digitizing their collection that hasn't even seen the light of day in like 20 some years or something like that. And part of what also got my interest in curation just like deeper embedded into me is working with those objects, like seeing how just they look and how they're handled, and also just like what they represent. And like it's always been so fascinating to me, and I actually really love the like behind the scenes processes of what that is, because like shows are beautiful, people put on wonderful exhibitions, but all of the hard work that goes in like behind the scenes is such a crucial part of the process. And
it truly is. And caring for these objects. So you know, I always remind people, but the word curator actually comes from the word to keep. You know, you are the keeper of the collections.
Right, absolutely. And it's so interesting too, because as works kind of revolve, like you'll have works that are kind of tucked away for a while and then new ones that come in. How do the ones that were kind of tucked away, how are they situated and how they're shown in today, right? Compared to like when they were acquired or when they were originally shown is also like, I think a really interesting part of the curatorial practice, because how do you talk about, like I think of some of the images I was digitizing from like the 40s and 50s and what the subject matter is, how do you contextualize that in a way that you can show today? Like learning that, because that's a whole language I think within itself that you have to learn as a curator.
Absolutely. So yes, I think that you know, there's a lot that goes into curatorial work that is not obvious to the visitor.
Absolutely. And it's interesting also to note that all of that like behind the scenes work is yes pivotal to the success of an exhibition, but also as the curator creating the narrative and the contextualization of that is something I'm also very fascinated in, is understanding like spatiality, like how do the works talk to each other based on if they're not the same medium or even quite the same subject, but there's a way to tell, like you said, like a story. And there's also always a part of the artist, the maker, attached to every object, and how do you also represent that in a way? So I think that leads to that's a great leadway to my next question of like, how do you basically approach starting the process of an exhibition, and how do you also start to building relationships with local artists? Like what is your just kind of basic process to getting that started?
After the Smithsonian, I worked at the Johnson Museum at Cornell University, and there I worked primarily in the contemporary collection, and also worked a lot with interns there on campus. So, and I started to really familiarize myself with the local art scene. And I guess what I would say is what I look for is when I do a lot of studio visits.
Sure.
And a lot of recommendations for artists that I should be aware of honestly come from other artists.
I believe that.
So I always, when I do a studio visit with an artist, I always ask, who else should I be seeing? What other work have you seen lately that really interests you? Yeah. And then I try to do some homework or backwork and see if, you know, so I look, I'm always looking. I look at Instagram.
We love Instagram.
I know some artists balk at being on it, but I tell people it's really one of the best ways that you can get your work Scene.
Oh, 100%.
Yes.
Or like
Yeah.
even see calls, for example. Like I see
Yes.
more of that, and it's weird. I'm more likely to trust the calls or the information I find on Instagram than like some of these like submittable places.
Right.
It just seems
Yes.
to me like that they're intentionally putting this out there for artists or for people in the art community to see. So yeah, I second that with
Yeah.
Instagram 100%.
And it's free, and it's
Exactly.
pretty easy to do.
Oh, yeah.
And but I tell people, everything that you present online, both your website and your Instagram, if your goal is to be a professional artist and have your work seen in museums, then you have to treat it all as if it's a professional portfolio.
Right.
Have a separate personal email personal Instagram account if
Right.
you want. But and keep your website up to date.
Oh, yeah,
There's nothing
sure.
worse than going back and looking at somebody's website and see that they haven't updated it in a couple
Like,
of years,
right, 5 or
or
10
they start a
years.
blog and it hasn't been updated.
Right.
If you're not going to keep it up, then just take it down.
Exactly.
And the same with Instagram. I think it's so easy to do good photos these
yeah.
days. So there's no excuse not to.
Right.
And that I look at a lot of that in terms of artists that I want to work with is are they professional about how they present their work?
Right.
But the larger thing, of course, that I look at is, have they developed a voice? Is there a thread that I can see through a body of work that is consistent and at a certain high level?
Right.
That it's not about being able to pull it off once. It's about, can you do it 20 times?
Right, like repetition pattern evidence of it. Yeah,
Yes,
absolutely.
Yes, a consistency of approach, a consistency of theme, or is there a show there?
Right.
So that's, I think a lot of artists sometimes aren't thinking about that. Like they're thinking of the piece that they're just made, and they're not thinking, how does that relate to the piece that I made before that and the piece that I'm going to make? And as a curator, that's what I'm looking at.
Right.
Is there a body of work there that can relate to one another, that the viewer coming in can get an idea of what the artist is trying to say or convey? And has the artist thought about how it is going to be displayed in the world? How does it leave the studio? And have they thought about that? Have they thought about, does it need to be framed? Does it need a pedestal? Does it need to be projected? Are they thinking about it beyond the studio walls? Because I am, as a curator.
Right.
And sometimes logistically you think, that's a great idea, but I don't think it can work.
Yeah, how can you execute it?
How can you execute it?
Right.
I guess, in short, to answer your question, I try to visit as many gallery shows as I can. Physically, to get around to see all of them, sometimes I can't. So that's why I rely on Instagram.
Yeah.
And then I really look for recommendations from other artists that I admire.
Yeah.
As probably the primary ways that I hear or think about work that I want to show. And then I think the key thing that I always ask art to say about curatorial work is that you should be able to answer these 3 questions: why this artist, why now, and why here. And as a curator, I should be able to clearly answer those things.
Absolutely.
And they change depending on context, depending on what institution you're working at. Working for a university museum is different than working for a contemporary art center like CMCA, where I was, the Center for Maine Contemporary Art. They have different missions.
Absolutely, yeah.
And they have different audiences as their primary audience. So I always think about that.
Yeah.
And then I think, is this artist doing work that is timely? That's, that
Like reflective.
yes.
Yeah.
Of this moment.
Absolutely.
When you're working at a contemporary art center like CMCA, it should be talking about issues of the day.
Yeah, what's happening right now.
Right now. Are they using the material in a new and innovative way, their medium in a new and innovative way? Are they expressing thoughts and messages that are are current and timely, and is it work that I think the public can learn from? Is the public going to be able to engage with this?
Yeah.
And is it going to push them a little but not turn them off?
Right.
And
that's the balance.
That's it. And that's a really fine line that you learn over the years about curating. Is you can take your art, you want to, especially in contemporary art, so you want to get your audience out of their comfort zone necessarily.
Right.
But you don't want to push them so far that you alienate them. So it's that tricky line to, help them think about the world in new ways and see it in new ways.
But still give them like a point of entry into it somewhere.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, you made a couple points that I think are really, really important. Community in the arts, like that's also how I've even like expanded my knowledge in the arts and in curation, is by just talking to people. That's kind of like the basis of this project, is to just be like, what do you know? I'd love to learn more from the community, and also like talking to artists. I've like, especially when I was working at the Zillman, I was able to learn from the artists that were showing like about why they did what they did. It would be just like, why did you choose this medium? Why have we situated it in this way? Because they were always relatively hands-on with like how the show was set up in a lot of ways, which was really interesting to me. Because I think it's really important to represent their vision in addition to what the mission is, like you were saying, of the institution. Because the mission and the voice of wherever the work is being shown is going to be there regardless of what you do. Like you were saying, like at university, they're going to have one direction, whereas like someplace like the CMCA is going to have a totally different one. So being able to represent that in a way that's truthful and genuine to the artists and their work, but then also what you're trying to give to the public, because that to me is what art has always been, is just like a way for the public, even if they're in the art community or not, or if it's like the first time they've stepped foot in an art museum, you're giving them an opportunity to like not always necessarily question their life, but just question the world around them and how they engage with it. Like my partner, he's an executive chef, and he doesn't think that his practice, or I call it a practice, but what he does for work is art. And if I showed you some of his platings, it literally looks like a painting, right? And so I've been able to like bring him to museums and stuff like that, and he's been able to engage with things differently because I was able to like break that barrier, that language that seemed to be like the obstacle, to be like, no, just perceive it differently, engage with it differently, like look for things that interest you and then ask questions about it, especially if the artist is there. You get to ask them directly, which is always really cool. But community is like, I think, the most important part. It really is.
It is, and honestly, that's the part of curating I love the most, is talking to people about art, is being in the gallery with the work. And on First Fridays at CMCA, when you get a lot of general public come in, I would just stand in the gallery and I would say, would you like me to tell you something about the art? And some people would say no, and some people, and then I said, and I always just give them a little bit, like just a little way in, and then you see the light go on.
Literally like
wow, that's pretty cool. Or, and whether it's, about, like when we had the John Bisbee exhibition, and he makes work out of nails, right? So, for some people it was his use of material. Right. It had a pretty political statement that year. So other people were like, wow, that's a really powerful message. Right. So and I always, for people who really don't know how to begin, and they say, well, I don't know how to look at a piece of art. Right. I always say, just start with just asking like really basic questions, and remember that, like we said, that this is another human being, right? Exactly. So to say, like, I wonder why they made it that size. Right. Just simply looking at it. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. I wonder why they put that red there. Right. Or, like, wow, I wonder why they chose to, use oil paint instead of watercolor. You know, start with like the very basic things, and then you think, well, gosh, they used watercolor because they wanted to get that effect of like, just really atmosphere and fluidness, or, and then you start thinking like, oh gosh, I think I've seen something like that before. And,
it connects to something else.
It does, and it makes you think. The filmmaker John Waters, he says that art that seeing and looking are different. Real life is seeing and art is looking.
Interesting.
And he said, and art is the greatest magic trick of all, because if you just, it trains you to see.
Yeah.
And once you see, you'll never see something again the same way.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's really like changes how you see the world.
Absolutely.
And I think that that happens a lot here in Maine, where, you know, there's so many artists that are part of our community here.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, it's kind of, you get kind of a kick out of that, like that, wow, I didn't see that before like that, but now I can't unsee it.
Yeah, because I have that
Yeah.
connection to
Yes.
it. Yeah, because one thing we're taught a lot in this program, and is very consistent theme in all the literature I've been consuming lately, is every single person will come to a piece of art or an exhibition with their own personal bias to it. So you have to, if you want to help engage them into the work beyond just looking at something, you want them to actually see it, right?
Yeah.
What is that either like similarity or something that they can connect their own personal experiences to the work in? And that can
Yes.
be something as simple as like, oh, that's a pretty blue. I remember seeing that blue like in the sky one day. Like just even something as simple as that
Absolutely.
holds so much weight to the experience of the viewer.
Yes.
And yeah, it's always an interesting thing to see that kind of happen in real time. I remember
Yes.
me and my partner went to the Portland Art Museum a couple months ago just to go peruse around and whatnot downtown Portland. And there was a couple viewing, I can't remember the name of the artist, but there was a beautiful rug piece on the floor, and it had, you know, the small barrier around it because I don't want people to step on the art, obviously. And I remember listening, because that's another thing I love to do, people watch and just kind of listen to the things going on around me,
Yes.
especially in creative centers like that. And I heard this gentleman asking the lady he was with, like, why would they put this on the ground if it's a piece of art? And it's like, oh, what a good question. Because
Right.
like, yeah, you're seeing it simply as a rug, but the reason the artist chose to show it that way is because they're connecting the elemental nature of a rug being on the ground, but showing it as a piece of art.
Yes.
So like, I didn't
Yes,
jump into
yeah,
their
yeah,
conversation,
yeah.
but in
Right,
my
right.
brain, I'm like, that's such a wonderful way to try to enter the
Right.
work, you know?
It's so, as a curator, to be that sort of in between, you know, so you have the artist and you have the artwork, and you're sort of triangle, you're the third point of the triangle,
Right.
with the public, you know, so it's like being able to help communicate those stories.
Yes.
Giving them that access and starting to open their world.
Right.
It can be really transformative,
Oh,
you know?
absolutely.
And I think once people have that experience, even if it just clicks once or twice, then they're like, they're
Wow.
just, they're a little more empathetic, you know?
Yeah.
Writer Seth Godin says, "Here, I made this," are four of the most powerful words in the human language,
Interesting.
because
Okay.
they carry with them generosity, intent, risk, and intimacy.
Oh, absolutely.
And he said the more we say them, the more we mean them, the more connection we can make, you
Yeah.
know? And I think about that, because that's what art is,
Yeah.
right? Is this artist is saying to the public, here, I made this.
Absolutely.
And I think that just, you know, that idea of giving, of that communication, you know, it's that sort of reciprocal kind of relationship that
Yeah.
art is able to do.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because art is such a vulnerable thing too.
Yes.
Because you're like we were talking about earlier, like the human nature that's attached to every object is so embedded in
Yes.
the fiber and the essence of those objects, regardless if
Yeah.
it's a performance, a sculpture, a painting. That essence is always going to be there. So that in itself is a sense of vulnerability. And so saying, "Here, I made this," like
Yeah.
that's so heavy, but
Yeah.
in such a, like you said, reciprocal type way, because both the artist is vulnerable in that state giving this thing that they made, but also the viewer, if they're open to it, can also place vulnerability in that exchange because they're open to thinking differently or like
Right.
seeing differently.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. So it's, you know, art can really help bridge differences, I think,
Oh,
too.
absolutely.
I mean, it's something that we can all share in and, you know, help bridge the divides that
Yeah.
really plague this society.
Oh, yeah.
So, in that way too, it's I think an important, powerful part of our humanity is this idea of having this sort of shared sensibility.
Oh yeah, and art being the language of that is something that has traversed history and time, and I don't think it's going to go anywhere.
Right.
I mean, there are parts of it that can be under attack for a variety of reasons, but the mission behind art, even if it's unspoken, every time someone decides to make an object and share it with the world, is never going to disappear.
Exactly.
People are always going to want to express or process or just create, because I think that's something so deep in the human nature, is to create, regardless of if it's seen as an object that can be sat in an art museum or like make a home for your family, because I think just that essence of wanting to create something is just so deeply embedded in the human species.
Absolutely. Creativity is can't be replaced. And I think especially now when we're thinking about, artificial intelligence.
Yes.
And, that it's taking over a lot of, mundane tasks and making workplaces more efficient. But there's some human abilities that can't be replaced by AI. And one of them is creativity and
100%.
Imagination. So the arts, to me, are going to become only more important as AI takes over routine tasks. And so because
all AI does is just learn from what already exists, and that's just human creation already, and so it'll never be original or genuine because it's just repetitive, and it's appropriating also across everything, whereas a human intent behind something considers all of that when they're making something. I totally agree. It's a hard thing to grapple with, especially being in higher ed right now, because it's such a common topic of how do you combat it, how do you incorporate it, how do you work with or against it, do you work with or against it? And I guess that's a good question, actually. Like, as a curator, have you been confronted with any ethical concerns with AI trying to infiltrate the arts in any of your experiences or anything like that?
I haven't had personal experience, but I've certainly heard about it, particularly in the field of fine art photography.
Oh, I believe that.
AI-generated images are being submitted to
shows,
photographic, content.
Oh my gosh.
Yes,
that's crazy to me.
Yes, and also I think the other ethical, concern is some of these AI supported video projections kind of things where they're skimming images from the internet and skimming other artists' images without permissions, so those are being used. So I think it is going to unleash it started, but it's going to be even more so. But I just feel like it's never going to really replace that human hand. Because we are also tactile people, I think. We want to touch things. We want to have that. So I think that we will always have this reverence for the handmade and the human touch.
Absolutely.
Or let's hope so.
Yeah, honestly. I think we both firmly believe in that, but it's interesting because, it's hard to ignore the headlines that come out about AI, especially in the arts, because I'm very active in following ArtNet News and the art newspaper and that kind of stuff. And I remember seeing a headline, again, I can't remember the name of the artist, but they programmed an AI robot to paint a picture of Dali, I think. And there were so many questions around, well, who actually made it then? How can you credit the artist if the robot hand painted it, but they were prompted to do it? And then there's just so many layers to that. And I've seen so many reels or TikToks online that show people selling large photo prints, that are all supported or assisted by AI. And in my head, I'm like, okay, how scary can that be? Because if we keep going down this rabbit hole, people who want to maybe experience art aren't going to be able to distinguish the difference, because someone who has a trained eye to look at fine art photos or just anything across what is AI and what isn't might not be able to always recognize that. And part of what makes art so good is like what we've been talking about is the human nature behind it.
Right.
So, and that's where the originality comes from too. And it's a very common topic in higher ed right now too. I guess I really only have one last question for you. Have you had, and it feels like the most like generic question, but I think it's nice to ask. Do you have a favorite or most influential like point or show in your career, something that you just kind of always go back to, even if it was like a learning experience rather than rather than the moment of being like, I made it, you know what I mean? Like, because either both of those have benefits to building your skills and experiences as a curator.
One of my first jobs at one of my first shows that I curated at the Johnston Museum at Cornell, I got to curate this Rodin show.
Oh.
And I was really young, and they gave me this responsibility, right? And I was like, wow.
Yeah.
This is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Like I get to decide like where these Rodin sculptures, they came from the Cantor collection, which is a big collection of Rodin sculptures.
Yeah.
And I was just out of grad school, so I must have been like, I don't know, 24.
Oh my goodness.
And I got to curate this Rodin show. That was like that really cemented within me, gave me the confidence that I could do this.
Right.
Okay, that I and making the decisions about how they were going to be displayed and every part of it really.
Yeah.
So that was one. But then I curated a show with Alex Katz at the at the Farnsworth Museum.
Cool.
And it was his first show of his work in Maine.
Okay.
It's called Alex Katz in Maine.
Literally.
And, he had been working in Maine probably at least 50 years by then, 45 years.
Wow.
But there had never been a show that really focused on just his Maine work.
Right.
And the experience of working with Alex was really fantastic. He's got an amazing eye, and he taught me a lot about how to look at painting.
Okay.
He talks about like open edges and closed edges, makes you really look at the brushwork.
Interesting.
And he talks a lot about how paintings are put together and their impact of them, and how what we think we see is not necessarily what we really see, or how we remember things.
The greatest magic trick of all, right?
The greatest magic trick of all. And so that was a really great experience. And then sort of cemented that relationship.
Yeah.
And I would say more recently, a lot of the shows I did at CMCA were really terrific, and all of those artists have become really close friends. And I love working with artists on solo shows of their work, because you really get to know them and you get to know their strengths. And one of them was the artist Anne Craven. We did her show Birds We Know.
Wow, okay, yeah.
And again, it was the first time she had ever shown in Maine, even though she had been working here since the late 80s.
Wow.
This was maybe 2019, I think it was, that show was. And she has become a really close friend since. And I think she's become a real presence in Maine through that exhibition. So those were ones that was a fairly recent one. But, I love putting shows together, and I love doing studio visits with artists.
Yeah.
And to me, that's a privilege to be able to spend time with an artist in their studio.
Yeah, and like we were saying earlier, I think you can tell the difference between somebody who sees it as like a life's calling and a passion compared to somebody who just sees it as a job. It's so obvious no matter what they do. And being able to do something that is a passion, that's so deep in you, and it's like I said, your life's calling is, I think, what we all strive for in life, is to find something that fulfills that part of us.
Absolutely.
And,
Someone asked me the other day, what do you do when you're not arting?
Arting?
Arting. And I said, that's what I do.
I just art all the time. What do you mean?
It's just, art is just what I
Everywhere.
do.
Yeah,
You know,
no,
like,
exactly.
you know, I don't make it, but I look at it and I think about it
Yeah.
and care about it all the time.
Absolutely. I mean, just being in your home, it feels like I'm in a small exhibition of just like your life and experiences a little bit. So I
Yeah.
think art is just part of you. And yeah, thank you so much for doing this. I
Oh.
really appreciate it. Honestly,
Thank you.
it's wonderful to talk to somebody who is a leading authority on the art in Maine and also just so passionate about what they do, because that fuels passion in others, especially as the generation that I'm a part of is upcoming into it. It's, I think, really important to solidify how important art is in the world, and talking about it is the way more people learn about it. So
Well, thank you for what you're doing.
yeah, thank you. Wonderful. Awesome.